Brother, sister. Right before a breakthrough, most people expect things to finally feel easier. Almost always, in real experience, they feel harder first, before they ever feel easier at all. Scripture is full of this exact pattern. Joseph's darkest years came directly before his elevation. David's most desperate wilderness seasons preceded his crown, and the disciples' most confused, frightened moment came the very night before resurrection morning finally arrived. If you're currently in a season that feels like everything, not less, that's not necessarily a sign that God has somehow forgotten you or abandoned your situation entirely. It might actually be a sign of exactly the opposite reality. Today we're naming 7 signs God consistently shows before a major breakthrough. Signs so easy to misread as setback or abandonment that most believers never learn to recognize them clearly until they're looking backward, long after the season has already passed. This isn't a formula guaranteeing any specific outcome, and it was never meant to function as one. It's a genuine pattern worth knowing well, so you can actually recognize it clearly while you're still living inside it. Stay with me. If your current season feels unusually difficult, this one might be for you. Think about the last time something genuinely good finally happened after a long, difficult season. Look back honestly at the weeks or months right before that breakthrough actually arrived. Were things generally getting easier and more comfortable, or did the difficulty, in some strange and unexpected way, actually intensify right before the shift finally happened? For many believers, looking back honestly at their own history reveals exactly this same pattern, even though it was nearly impossible to recognize clearly while actually living through it in real time. The first sign is increased spiritual opposition right before the breakthrough actually arrives. Discouragement that seems to come from nowhere. Relational conflict flaring up unexpectedly. A sudden wave of doubt about things you'd felt genuinely settled on before. This pattern shows up again and again throughout Scripture. Resistance intensifying specifically at the threshold of breakthrough, not randomly, but as though something is actively trying to prevent you from reaching what's just ahead. Increased opposition isn't proof you're off track. Sometimes it's evidence you're closer than you realize. Consider the specific timing of this pattern throughout Scripture. The most intense spiritual attacks recorded often cluster right around moments of significant transition or breakthrough, not evenly scattered across an entire lifetime. This doesn't mean every difficult season is automatically evidence of an approaching breakthrough. Sometimes hardship is simply hardship, but a sudden, unusual intensity of opposition, specifically arriving during a season you already sense might be significant, is worth paying attention to rather than automatically interpreting as failure or divine absence. The second sign is a season of waiting that intensifies rather than eases just before the answer finally comes. The silence gets heavier. The timeline stretches further than you expected. Just when you think you can't wait any longer, the waiting somehow gets harder rather than easier. This isn't cruelty on God's part. Throughout Scripture, the final stretch before breakthrough often coincides with the most intense pressure of the entire waiting season, as though the pressure itself is part of what's actually forming you for what's coming. Think about the specific quality of pressure right before something finally gives way, in almost any context. The final push before a door finally opens, the last stretch of exhaustion before a long journey's actual end. Waiting seasons often follow a similar shape spiritually. The final stretch frequently feels disproportionately hard compared to the earlier, more manageable parts of the wait, precisely because it's the last remaining resistance before the answer actually breaks through. The third sign is small tests of faithfulness happening in obscurity, where nobody's watching and no reward seems immediately attached. Faithfulness in a mundane task nobody will ever know about. Integrity maintained when cutting a corner would have been so much easier and completely unnoticed. Scripture consistently shows God testing character in hidden, unglamorous places before entrusting someone with something significantly larger. If you're being tested in obscurity right now, faithful in things that feel completely unseen, that's often precisely the proving ground breakthrough gets built on. Joseph's years managing another man's household, faithful in a role far beneath what he was actually being prepared for, offer a clear picture of this exact pattern. Nobody watching him in that season could have predicted where his faithfulness was actually leading. The tests that matter most spiritually are rarely dramatic or public. They're usually small, private, and easy to skip when no one's watching, which is precisely what makes faithfulness in them so significant. The fourth sign is old relationships, or situations beginning to fall away naturally, without any dramatic conflict forcing the separation. A friendship that simply, quietly drifts. A situation that used to consume your attention, quietly losing its grip. This isn't always rejection or loss to grieve. Sometimes it's simply God clearing space for what's coming next, removing what belonged to a previous season so there's genuine room for what's actually ahead. This particular sign is easy to misread as loss, and sometimes genuine grief is appropriate even when the season shift is ultimately good. But notice the specific quality of this kind of drifting. It rarely comes with dramatic conflict or clear rejection. It simply happens gradually, quietly, almost gently, in a way that often feels less like abandonment and more like outgrowing a season that's genuinely reached its natural conclusion. The fifth sign is a renewed, almost unexpected hunger for prayer and scripture, arriving without any obvious external trigger. A sudden pull back toward genuine, unhurried time with God, after a season where that discipline had maybe grown thin or routine. This hunger often isn't something you manufacture through sheer willpower. It shows up almost on its own, as though something in your spirit is being prepared, stirred, made ready for what's coming, even before your circumstances have given you any concrete reason to expect it. Pay attention if you notice this specific shift happening in your own life right now. Waking up earlier than usual simply to pray, finding yourself drawn back to Scripture without any external accountability pushing you there. A genuine desire for God's presence that feels different from mere religious obligation. This kind of hunger often precedes exactly the kind of spiritual capacity a coming breakthrough will actually require. The sixth sign is confirmation arriving through multiple unrelated sources or people, all pointing toward the same direction without any coordination between them. A sermon that speaks directly to your specific situation. A friend, with no idea what you're going through, saying something that lands with startling precision. A verse you stumble across that seems to address the exact question sitting in your heart. When confirmation starts arriving from multiple, genuinely unconnected directions, it's worth paying close attention rather than dismissing it as mere coincidence. The key distinction here is genuine independence between the sources. A single person telling you what you want to hear isn't the same as multiple unrelated voices. People who have no idea what the others said, no coordination between them at all, consistently pointing toward the same direction. When that specific pattern emerges clearly, it's worth taking seriously as something beyond ordinary chance. And the seventh, maybe the most surprising of all, a peace that genuinely doesn't match your actual circumstances. Your situation on paper still looks unresolved, maybe even worse than before, and yet something steady and calm settles in underneath the difficulty. A peace you can't fully explain or account for, given what's actually happening around you. Scripture describes exactly this kind of peace, one that surpasses understanding, that doesn't wait for circumstances to improve before it arrives. When that specific peace shows up in the middle of ongoing difficulty, it's often one of the clearest signs that something real is shifting, even before you can see any visible evidence of it yet. This peace differs meaningfully from denial or simple avoidance of a hard reality. It coexists with genuine, clear-eyed awareness of exactly how difficult the situation actually still is. What makes it distinct is its source. It doesn't come from having solved the problem or fixed the circumstances, but from somewhere else entirely. A steadiness that circumstances alone can't fully explain or account for. So what does it actually look like to recognize these 7 signs while you're living through them, rather than only in hindsight? It looks like recognizing increased opposition as possible proximity rather than automatic failure. It looks like trusting that an intensifying wait may be nearing its actual end. It looks like staying faithful in obscure, unseen places without needing immediate recognition. It looks like releasing old relationships and situations without excessive grief when they naturally fall away. It looks like following a renewed hunger for God rather than dismissing it as random. It looks like paying attention when confirmation arrives from multiple unconnected directions. And it looks like trusting a peace that doesn't yet match your circumstances rather than needing full resolution before you're willing to feel it. None of these 7 signs guarantee a specific breakthrough on a specific timeline. Scripture never actually promises that kind of formula. But recognizing this pattern can change how you experience a hard season while you're still inside it, transforming blind endurance into something closer to genuine, informed hope. Here's a simple way to actually apply these 7 signs. If you find yourself in a season that feels genuinely significant right now, whatever the specific circumstances involved, rather than treating each sign as an isolated data point, look for the pattern forming across several of them simultaneously. One difficult week doesn't necessarily indicate anything spiritually significant, but increased opposition, arriving alongside an intensifying wait, alongside a renewed hunger for prayer, alongside unexpected peace despite unchanged circumstances. That combination, appearing together, is far more meaningful than any single sign considered on its own. Consider keeping a simple, honest record of what you're actually experiencing during a season like this, whether through journaling, prayer, or simply conversation with a trusted friend who can help you notice patterns you might miss on your own. Seasons like this are often clearer in hindsight than they are while you're actually living through them. And having some record of what you noticed in real time can help you recognize the pattern more clearly, both now and in future seasons that may follow a similar shape. It's also worth saying plainly that not every difficult season is actually building toward an imminent breakthrough. Some hardship is simply hardship, without any larger pattern attached to it. And forcing every difficulty into this framework can become its own kind of unhealthy spiritual bypassing, avoiding the genuine grief or difficulty a hard season actually calls for. These 7 signs are a pattern worth knowing, not a guarantee to be forced onto every circumstance, regardless of whether it actually fits. What these 7 signs can offer, when they do genuinely apply, is a different way of holding a hard season, not blind, exhausted endurance, but something closer to informed, attentive hope. You're not just surviving the difficulty, you're watching for signs that something real is actually happening beneath the surface, even when the visible circumstances haven't caught up yet to reflect it. Consider how differently a hard season feels when approached this way, compared to simply enduring it with no framework at all for understanding what might actually be happening underneath the difficulty. The circumstances themselves may not change immediately, but your posture toward them can shift meaningfully, from simple survival toward genuine, attentive expectation. If this stirred something in you, brother, sister, don't scroll past it. Subscribe to Biblical Warning now, and let's keep examining these hidden places together, one warning at a time.